Hi everyone, I'm Shelly from There's No Place Like Home at redheadmom8.wordpress.com. One thing that you probably don't know about me is that I have about 3 books that I write down all of the ideas that I have for videos. And I also used to use them for blog posts, but I have not been writing on my blog like I used to. One of those ideas in particular was about IEPs. I have always wanted to address IEPs here on my channel. And I did do one video about homeschooling in Pennsylvania with an IEP, and I'll address that a little bit here today. But the reason that I'm going to delve more deeply into it is because I was really inspired by a comment that someone left on one of my community posts. It was by a commenter by the name of Newlywed Beth, and she summed it up absolutely perfectly when she said, "Homeschooling is the ultimate IEP." When you are the parent of a child in the public education system who has an IEP, and you start to think about wanting to pull your child out of that system in order to homeschool them, that piece of paper, that IEP, can be the one thing that really makes you think twice about doing it. It can be intimidating when you think about all of those meetings that you've gone into with all of the experts who are coming up with plans on how your children can learn best. All of the things that you've had to sign throughout the years as you have to renew this IEP every single year. And so I know that it really is something that kind of holds a lot of parents back from taking the final plunge because they think that they're just not qualified to homeschool their child if their child has an IEP. But as I mentioned in the intro, the commenter, Newlywed Beth, who I must say is a former teacher, she summed it up 100% correctly. Homeschooling is the ultimate IEP. Now, for those of you who aren't sure what an IEP is, IEP stands for Individualized Educational Program, or sometimes it means plan. And while most of the time it is referring to a child who has some sort of learning disability according to the school, it can also at times be something that is for a child who is requiring accelerated learning because they are a little bit advanced in what they're doing. And I, in my personal life, have actually had experience with both of those. When I was in school, I was in gifted and honors classes. They might call them gifted and talented nowadays. They also sometimes used to call them gifted AP classes when I was in there. But no matter the name, I had an IEP. And what it was just basically a piece of paper in which they listed some different projects that I was going to have to complete in order to keep me on an accelerated track, more to stimulate my learning in case the classroom learning that I was getting was not enough for me. Now, on the other hand, I have a son who had an IEP for reading comprehension, and his IEP was in place for learning support to help him, different ways to get him to learn in a way that suited him best. And so if you actually think about what is on an IEP, they will often talk about a child's strengths and weaknesses. They will talk about a child's learning style or their learning preferences. They will talk about goals that they have for the student, the need for specialized assistance in certain things, or in other cases, maybe additional projects that they need to do in order to keep them stimulated in the classroom. And also, lastly, another thing that will often be listed on that IEP is how these goals are going to be implemented, how this is all going to be approached. So if you think of this in technical terms, yeah, you might think to yourself, how am I, as a parent who has not had training, teacher training, how am I going to fulfill all of that? But I've got to tell you, all of those things can easily be fulfilled in a homeschool atmosphere. And I will also tell you that most homeschoolers are already doing this without even knowing it. You know, I talk here on my channel all the time about homeschooling is so good for kids because you can tailor it specifically to meet their needs. You can shape it around their learning style. You can go as quickly or as slowly as you need them to. You can give your kids one-on-one time that children in a classroom very often do not get. And all of these things are things that would be included in an IEP. That is how children who have IEPs in school are having their learning presented to them. But you know what? Very often, those children are having to get pulled out of their classroom, and sometimes they're missing out on other classes because of having to get pulled out of their classroom, but they're having that one-on-one time, or maybe a learning specialist might be with them and a couple other children versus, 25 or 30 kids in their classroom. So they're getting smaller group learning time in school. But, on the downside, they might be missing other things. But this is something that, again, can be easily implemented into a homeschool, and most homeschoolers are already doing it without even having the notion of an IEP anywhere in their mind at all. Now, in my video that I made quite a while ago about homeschooling in Pennsylvania with an IEP, I discussed, the paperwork that you have to do and everything in Pennsylvania, because you know what? I'm not an expert on homeschooling in other states. I don't know how it works when it comes to state laws in other states. I don't know about IEPs in other states. I only know what is going on where I live because, I have had to deal with an IEP when I first withdrew my son out of school. What you have to do in Pennsylvania, if you have a child who has an IEP and you pull them out, is you have to write a list of objectives, which you have to do for all children who you're going to homeschool, who are of compulsory school age in Pennsylvania. You have to do a list of objectives for all students. But if you have a child who has an IEP in school, you have to find a teacher with a special education degree who can go over those objectives and will approve them for you before you can send them on to the school district. And that is a legal requirement that you have to do. And, when I used to have to do that, it used to be frustrating to me for the very reasons that I've been talking about, because these goals, these techniques that they use for these children with IEPs are things that are naturally done in a homeschool setting. So to have to have a special education teacher approve those objectives, which I've got to say, some special education teachers make you pay them to go over the list of objectives and approve them. I was blessed enough that I found one through my church. She didn't go to my church, but her mother did. So she did not charge me anything for doing it. But sometimes it's an additional cost that you have to spend to start homeschooling your child. But in all honesty, when you are homeschooling a child with an IEP, it isn't going to look much different than when you're homeschooling the rest of your kids, those who didn't have IEPs, or those who will never have an IEP because they will never be in a school setting. Now, yes, there are going to be children who do need additional support services that maybe a parent can't help them with at home, and these are usually more severe learning disabilities or other severe physical needs that maybe parents aren't equipped to do at home, and that is something completely different. But a large majority of the IEP things, that's so technical, isn't it? But a large majority of the things listed on IEPs and the reasons that kids get them are things that can be easily addressed by a parent who knows their child, who takes the time to look at how their kids learn, who works their child's interests into what they're doing, and who follows their child's timeline rather than what a school or a doctor tells them, and who is available to listen to anything that their child has to tell them, any questions that they have, and will always follow that intuition that a parent will always have over a teacher. So anyway, that's all that I have for you today. If you liked this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed yet and would like to hear more of what I have to say, I would love if you would do that. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave one over on Instagram because YouTube disabled my comments. And if you like my work and would like to check out my Patreon page, I will leave a link in the description box for that as well. And I hope you have a great day.